Hello folks, Bill Wilson here from Wilson Combat. I'm here with my old-time friend Ken Hackathorn. We're going to discuss a topic today that our customer service people deal with relatively frequently, and that is pros and cons of how reliable hardball ammunition is in a 1911 platform. Ken, what do you think?
Well, I think a lot of people need to understand that when John Browning designed the pistol, there was no CAD/CAM programs, no high-speed photography. He had to figure it out in his head. Most people don't realize that John Browning designed the 32 ACP, the 380 ACP, the 38 Colt Auto, which later became the 38 Super, and the 45 Auto. He designed those cartridges to work in his gun.
Yeah.
Of those cartridges, the 32 Auto, 38 Colt, or later 38 Super, are semi-rim cartridges. The only cartridges he designed that are rimless are the 45 Auto and the 380. And his job was to design a cartridge. Remember, the U.S. government set the specs. This is what we want. They're the ones that came up with the original 45 Auto round developed for the U.S. government. John Browning created was a 200 grain bullet.
Yeah.
And based upon experiences in the Philippines with the Moros and stuff, the U.S. Army came back and said, no, we want more bullet weight. We know the 45 Colt did a good job if you put the bullet where it needs to go.
Well, that original one was a 200 at 900 feet a second, wasn't it?
And they backed it off to a 230 at approximately 850 feet per second was what they said we want. So John Browning said, okay, I'll make it. Now, what people don't realize, he built a gun to fire a specific cartridge, and most importantly, the 230 grain bullet had a specific ogive. And ogive, folks, by definition is, let's say, is a Gothic arch.
Yeah, it's this profile.
Yeah, it's that profile
of the nose of the bullet.
Yeah, and some people will argue that the definition of ogive is that the radius of a bullet equals the diameter. Well, that changes depending on calibers and bullet style and stuff. But back then, he created a bullet with a specific ogive. And that bullet was loaded first at Frankfurt Arsenal and eventually through other cartridge companies for the U.S. government procurement. And they didn't vary. They didn't have an option. That's the way the bullet was made. And he designed a magazine, of course, to feed that particular bullet. And
at a specific overall length.
Specific overall length. And by the way, it was specified, and the U.S. government held that standard. The feed ramp on a 1911 pistol barrel was 31.5 degrees. That was specific. They couldn't alter it. That's the way it was. So if you took, say, this original round, this is a GI dummy 230 grain ball round from EC, is Evansville Cartridge Plant in 1944, dummy round, and you put it in the cartridge, what you notice is the feed lips are somewhat parallel and they slightly expand out to the release point. The release point is at some point that round is driven forward, hits the feed ramp, and as the feed ramp, it has a release point that lets it go up. And we know the extractor in the original design is somewhat controlling that round's feed angle.
Yeah, it's supposed to go up under the extractor as it comes out of the magazine.
In theory.
In theory.
Okay.
And it almost always does in a full-size gun.
Yeah, in a 5-inch gun, it does very well. Now, the system worked great. Now, what people don't realize, let's fast forward to, say, the beginning of the IPSC era, which you and I were pretty heavily involved in. Well, most people reloaded. And we all discovered for accuracy, reliability, there was a bullet called the H&G number 68, 200 grain bullet. And whoever designed it, even though it's a semi-wide cutter, where the bullet nose hits the feed ramp, the ogive's the same.
Exactly the same.
So it fed reliably, but in these tapered original feed lips, it worked even better if you had an earlier release point. Then another thing happened in about that same era. Suddenly, hollow point ammunition became the new rage in America. And everybody wanted a hollow point to carry for self-defense. And all the companies launched into it. Now, most hollow points end up being shorter. If you kind of look at the length of a GI ball round and that, you'll see not only is it shorter, but ogive's different. So what you learn, everybody else is, that you have to do what we call a modified feed lip design with an earlier release point in order to get those rounds feed reliably. And you jumped into the market and introduced your magazine, and the world's not been the same since in the 1911 world. The other problem is, long about 1985, the U.S. government adopted a new pistol called the M9 Beretta in a 9mm caliber. suddenly demand for the U.S. government purchasing .45 ammo really started to drop off. This round I have right here is WCC, Winchester Cartridge Company, 98 match.
Yeah.
And I got this for part of a home storage program many years ago when I was working in the government sector, say. But this is probably one of the last years that .45 ball ammo was ever procured for the government. And this match ammo theoretically was for the national matches.
Yeah. And it's made to current.
It's original
to the original spec.
No variants.
Yeah.
Along the way, once the U.S. government no longer was procuring ammunition from Winchester, Federal, and Remington, that was out of the company started changing the shape of the bullets and the length. And I've got some other rounds here if you look at them real close, none of them are different lengths, there's different shapes to the Ogive. So you go out to the gun shop today, you buy a fancy new Wilson pistol, and you go out and you buy, and unfortunately people tend to buy the cheapest shit they can buy. I mean, it's human nature. I think pistol shooters compared to rifle shooters and shotgun shooters are cheap Charlies by nature. But you go out and you buy some ammo and you think, well, this is good. It's Privy Partisan, it's Fiocchi, it's Gecko, it's some foreign-made, less expensive ammo, and they load it up in their fancy new blaster and they go out and shoot it and they go, stuff doesn't feed. There's something wrong with my gun. Maybe not the gun, maybe the ammo is the villain. And so you would say, well, it doesn't work the way I want it to. It's more likely not the gun, it probably is the ammo. But you say, what do I do about it? I can't find this original spec ammo because they don't make it anymore. So it produces some problems and issues to talk about. I know you guys deal with that on a regular basis. I tell people that two things come to mind. Be somewhat selective about your ammo. And that's tough in an ammo pandemic. It's tough to tell people that they got to be selective with their ammo. By the way, extractor tension is a factor. And the bevel, the relief bevel on extractor. You might explain that to the folks. And I know your new bulletproof extractor, you guys addressed that shape of the nose of the extractor and the relief cut. And explain to people a bit about how important that is in the feeding cycle.
Well, as the round is being released from the magazine, as it gets here to the release point and it starts under the extractor, it's still at a somewhat of an angle. But the back of the case is already against the breech face, so it's committed now. It's coming out of the magazine. It's headed towards the chamber. If it can't make that corner to get under the extractor, regardless of what your bullet shape is, you're going to get a stoppage right there. It's got to make that corner to get that rim right under the extractor. And to do that, you got to have the bottom of the extractor hook. Think of it as a hook like this. The bottom of it's got to be radiused, but also if you look at the hook from the face on, the bottom corner's got to be radiused here.
Yeah.
And
pretty dramatically.
Yeah. And if you want it to come up there smoothly, it's got to have those two radiuses on it, and it's going to come up there. Yeah. And in order to get the most reliable control round feeding, like John Browning designed the gun for, the extractor's got to have some tension on it. Like if you have the slide off the gun and you slide a loaded cartridge under the extractor, and you should be able to rotate that slide 360 degrees without that loaded round falling out. Should be enough tension to do that. Right. That's another thing we do about our bulletproof extractors. Now with modern machinery, there's some of these machines are as much as 11 axis. Well, we make our extractors on 11 axis Swiss screw machine, and so as you know, the extractor's got to have a little bit of curve to it, to be able to get that tension. Well, if it starts out straight and you bend it to get that curve, it naturally always wants to go back to that original straight length that it was at when it was heat treated.
Right.
Well, with modern machinery, we machine that curve into the extractor, and then it gets heat treated. Cool. So its natural state that it wants to stay at is in the curved position. Yeah. And we found that the tension, we don't have any issue maintaining tension on the extractors anymore like we did when we were having to bend them after heat treat.
Yeah. And and people ask me about the 1911 pistol and the pros and cons. And it was designed, let's face it, well over a century ago. And it was designed to feed one cartridge. Back then, that's the way it was with almost all auto pistols. One cartridge and one bullet Ogive. And so we evolved today, and we've done our best to modify the design of the feed system. You've stepped to the plate with an extractor that kind of solved. I tell people, a lot of people say, well, my gun malfunctioned, it needs throated. That's rarely the case. It's probably more either the magazine or the extractor problem. Yes. so there's a series of things. Magazines are important, bullet ogive is important, and the final one is your extractor, not only tension, but profile. You combine it, the 1911 pistol is a lot more sensitive ammunition-wise than many other modern designs. Yep. And people have said, well, can you change that feed angle of 31.5 degrees? On a 45, not very easy. No. Because you don't have the length. People have told me, well, 38 supers, because it's the overall length of a 45, feed very, very reliably. No, they don't. They've always been, because remember, it's a semi-rim cartridge, so adjusted properly and built correctly, yeah, but we both know those guns tend to be a little bit more sensitive ammo-wise. And I tell people, if you're going to carry a 45, you need to figure out, one, what does my gun feed reliably? And if you're going to go out and pick a hollow point round, you need to pick one that has approximately the same overall length and kind of matches in ogive. And for example, I know a round that people ask me about all the time, well, I want to carry a 230 grain jacket hollow point in my 1911 pistol, what would you recommend? Well, today it's tough because it's not what you want, it's what you can find. Yeah. But the Remington Golden Saber, I found to be almost identical ogive original round that feeds like great. Yeah, and Remington used to have a kind of a bad reputation in the ammo market. I think we both know that with the new management, a new system, I suspicion they're going to take a giant step forward in that particular
I think Vista will produce the best Remington ammunition we've ever seen.
Yeah. And they don't have only one way to go. Now, so when you start looking for hollow points, if it's shorter than a standard ball round, that's a bad sign in a 1911 45 pistol. Yeah. Now, mind you, in a Colt Commander, when Colt engineered that gun, it's got a shorter slide travel. It's actually got a 29 degree feed ramp angle. And you say, why? Because they apparently decided 31.5 was not adequate for that longer side stroke it worked for, so they actually went to a little bit steeper one, which we know it makes reliable feeding of hollow points, and some of our white cutters even toucher in Commanders. Yeah. So only I can tell people is, if you're going to shoot hardball, in many ways these old GI magazines were pretty good. But if you want the flexibility of shooting like different hollow points, or particularly like semi-wad cutters like we all like, I know Wilson Combat sells. We may have to shoot this fly in just I think it's a Democrat, I really do. Bottom line is, you've got to look at your gun, look at your choices of ammunition, and understand that when you choose a 230 grain hardball round to shoot in your 45, it is not necessarily the most reliable. Yeah. You and I are great fans of that number 68, and you guys sell that.
Oh yeah, we really like that. It's not only is it super accurate, but it just feeds so good. Probably the best.
It's the best. Yeah. Feeding 45 round. Yeah. Bar none. Yeah. So, you got anything else to add to it, Bill? I think we tried to touch on the main points, but...
Well, I mean, like you touched on, when you go to select your hollow point round for a carry gun, number one, you want to shoot enough of it to make sure it is reliable, your gun, your magazines, that sort of thing. But in general, the longer overall length you've got and the more pointed the bullet is, the better it's going to feed.
Hope that helps out, folks. Be sure and subscribe to the Wilson Combat YouTube channel. Information like this is critical to you and your ability to use your weapon. Make sure you tune in the next time, and stay safe, watch yourself on the range, see you down the road.